The high-definition version of the crime thriller Flower and Moon Killer, starring Xiao Lizzi and Leonardo DiCaprio, has finally been streamed. This is not only a film adapted from real events, but also the most promising high-quality popular film of the year to impact the Oscars. His director is the famous Martin Scorsese. If you don't have much concept of this name, then you must have seen his excellent works such as Shuttle Island, Irish, or Wolf of Wall Street. The production cost of this film is as high as $200 million. Currently, the freshness of overseas Rotten Tomatoes is 96%, so it is definitely the surprise family you cannot miss this year. Without further ado, please follow my commentary to savor it carefully. In the 19th century, the indigenous people of America, Osage and Indian, were driven away by white people and wandered to the state of Oklahoma in the central and southern United States, where they established their reservations. This is an endless vast grassland, but it is also a desolate place that even dogs don't want to stay in. Reduce. I thought the Odyssey people would spend a dull and desolate life here, but when the time came to 1920, they unexpectedly discovered a large amount of oil mines in this barren land. With its existence that is comparable to gold, the Osage tribe quickly rose to power. The Osage people, with only over 2,000 people, were evenly distributed and mined according to their head power, directly making them the wealthiest small group in the world. You should know that no white person was willing to come to this land until oil was discovered. But now, with the emergence of oil, more and more white people are flocking, and the 20th century is already a rule of law society. They can no longer use barbaric methods to forcibly plunder the wealth of the Odyssey people, but can only use various means to come here to seek gold. Unexpectedly, after coming into contact with the Osage people, I realized that making money from them was not too easy. For example, if you take a photo for $35, the Osage people don't care about the price at all. They take dozens of photos at once, and even at that time, a coffin could be sold for $3,000. What's even more outrageous is that once the latest models have a flat tire or are gone, the Osage people also say that they can change, because they have no concept of money and only know that they can't spend it all. So more and more white people came here to work for the Osage people, thinking that if they could gain some benefits, they might have a worry-free life. At this moment, the end of World War I coincided, and the male protagonist Ernest, who had just returned from the battlefield, arrived at this reservation by train. Unlike other workers, he came to seek refuge with his uncle William Hale. Unexpectedly, an Ossetian named Henry came to greet him. Judging from the situation, this person seems to have an unusual relationship with his uncle. As he passed by Henry's land, Ernest finally realized why the Ossetes were so wealthy, because wherever his gaze was on the oil pump, and this land belonged only to Henry. I can imagine how wealthy the entire Osage BLO should be, to be friends with such people. So Ernest's uncle Hale is not simple either. He is a reliable cattle tycoon. Although there is not a trace of oil on the land of the cattle farm, Hale relies on his own abilities to get close to the Ossetes. As a white person and a well-known philanthropist in the area, he became an important link between white people and the economic development of the Osage people. With his relationship with the Osage people, he also successfully became the deputy sheriff of this protected area and won the respect of many Osage people. Hale told Ernest about the history of the Ossetes and gave him a book about them. Because in order to develop on this land, it is necessary to understand this seed. Although they became wealthy overnight and had no concept of money, it does not mean that they do not know anything. On the contrary, they are very intelligent, so when dealing with the Osage people, one must be careful and avoid talking too much. Because Ernest was injured on the battlefield, Hale arranged for him to work as a driver. On his first day at work, he successfully received an Ossetian named Molly. Unexpectedly, the gears of fate also turned. After escorting Jasmine to several places, Ernest gradually became his exclusive driver. When Uncle Hale learned about this, he asked Ernest if he knew anything about Jasmine. Ernest certainly doesn't know, he only knows that the other party gave a lot of tips, so Hale told him that Molly was an Osage of pure blood. According to the existing law, he could inherit all the property of the family. For example, Molly's family had 4 sisters. If these sisters died, their wealth would all belong to Molly. If a man can marry Jasmine, this property will also be inherited by her husband or child after Jasmine's death. In layman's terms, it means that white people can marry the Osage people and ultimately obtain their coveted oil rights. Hale's implied meaning is to let Ernest seize this opportunity, and Ernest is actually a man who likes money but has no independent opinions. Under his uncle's suggestion, he quickly decided to pursue Jasmine. Although this face didn't look handsome, with a sense of humor, he still managed to win Jasmine's favor. However, Jasmine is not a brainless lover either. He understands that all white people who approach him value his wealth more, so he always maintains a certain distance from Ernest, which precisely stimulates the man's fighting spirit. In the evening, Ernest will delve into the history of the Osage people in order to find common topics with Jasmine. Not long after, Ernest's initiative received a reward.
Jasmine gave him a cowboy hat and invited him to dinner together tonight. And this is also Ernest's first time walking into Jasmine's home.
It's just that Jasmine's mother doesn't like him a bit, because in the eyes of this woman, all the white people who approach his daughter are just for the sake of their family's wealth. Not only Jasmine, but also other daughters.
In the evening, when Jasmine and Ernest had dinner together, they talked about this topic.
Unexpectedly, Ernest did not deny it. He said that he did indeed yearn for money and freedom. Speaking of being a driver, he prefers to take a deep sleep while drinking whiskey, especially when encountering women like Jasmine who are not only wealthy but also live in such a large house.
He really can't find any reason not to pursue them.
Ernest's words made Jasmine laugh out loud, as if she had never expected a man to be so straightforward.
The next rainstorm also promoted the relationship between the two.
Ernest did not expect that he would capture Molly's heart in another way. Maybe sincerity is the eternal must-kill skill. Later, Molly often took her to various occasions, and Molly's sisters were also curious about the man. They all knew that white people approached Molly for money.
I don't understand why Jasmine still agreed to the other party. Jasmine answered like this.
There is actually the most important point in the fight against organized crime, which is the close relationship between Ernest's uncle Hale and the Osage people.
Therefore, after comprehensive consideration, Molly believes that Ernest is worth entrusting for life.
As time passed, it was only natural for the two of them to hold an Indian-style wedding, and Hale personally witnessed their marriage and sent his blessings. The scene was filled with high friends, full of joy and laughter, singing and dancing. And in this joyful atmosphere, Jasmine's sister Minnie showed great pain. It turned out that she had contracted a malignant disease and was about to die soon. As the most trusted white elder of the Osages, Hale enlightened them and delivered them a special healing spell to win. However, soon after, Minnie eventually passed away from the world. Just as the family was in immense pain, Minnie's husband Bill suddenly kicked Ernest out of the house to offer condolences. Ernest didn't understand why the other party was so hostile to him, until his uncle Hale told him that now he and Bill actually have a competitive relationship for inheritance rights. Generally speaking, for example, after Minnie's death, his property will be inherited first by his mother, while many Osage women, due to genetic diseases, do not live until the age of 50. Minnie's mother also sees the situation as such. When she also dies, her property and Minnie's property will be distributed to sisters like Molly and Minnie's husband, which is called the head power. Hale suggested that if Ernest wanted Molly to inherit all the property, unless her sisters and their husbands all had accidents. The implied meaning is that if Ernest wants to become the ultimate winner, then everyone else must die. This statement is enough to show the darkness, and this person is not a good person either. When flowers bloom all over the hills, this month is called the flower moon by the Osages, which means that the source of life begins on the earth. In stark contrast, some Osages are gradually decreasing, either dying from illness, suicide, or at the hands of their husbands, as if fate is about to descend upon this land of wealth. Not long after, Jasmine, who was eating for her child, also received bad news that her elder sister Anna had an accident. After Jasmine and Ernest arrived at the scene, they discovered that Anna had become a cold corpse. According to the on-site investigation, he was shot dead in the head, clearly a murder. At the same time, on another piece of land, a male Osagean was shot and killed in an oil field. The series of murders that occurred one after another has caused panic throughout the entire Osage tribe, with some believing it was a deliberate murder created by someone to plunder their wealth. So the chief of the Osage tribe immediately decided, first, to offer a bounty for people who could provide any clues or information, and second, to have a representative named Mike go to Washington to seek government help, because the police here are no longer trustworthy. Jasmine has also decided to hire a private detective to investigate the cause of her sister's death, as a gesture of goodwill with the Osage people. Hale publicly stated that he is willing to add $1,000 to the bounty amount. This statement once again won the favor of the Osages, and soon after, Jasmine's mother also passed away due to illness. The entire Jasmine family was left with only him and his other sister Rita, who inherited the other person's voting property. On that day, Ernest was comforting his sad wife when suddenly Bill and Molly's other sister Rita walked over. Unexpectedly, this guy walked with Rita again shortly after Minnie's death. Although Ernest didn't say anything, at this moment he also realized that Bill was not simple. Not long after, Mike, who was preparing to go to Washington, was stabbed to death on the way, and the hired private detective also found Jasmine. He first investigated the death of Jasmine's elder sister Anna. It is said that Ernest had drunk too much that day and asked his brother to send Anna back home, who also had a hangover. Therefore, the private detective investigated Anna's home, and from his handbag, it can be proven that Ernest's brother did not lie. Anna did indeed return home, but no one knows how she died in a remote suburb afterwards. And while he was investigating Anna's cause of death, he found that there was another person actively investigating Anna's death, and that person was Bill. The private detective was somewhat surprised that this guy could handle Jasmine's two sisters separately, and now claims to have found some clues.
Once the evidence is confirmed, it will be made public.
Ernest, who learned about these, quickly informed his uncle of the news. So one night shortly after, a sudden explosion quickly alarmed the entire town. When Ernest arrived outside, he found that Jasmine's sister Rita's house had been bombed into ruins. The rescue team found Rita's body and Bill, who was struggling to death. After arriving at the scene in the dark the next day, the sheriff suddenly said a thought-provoking sentence.
You know, you're pronouncing yourself too much, Bill.
Turns out, all of this was done by the man in front of him. On the surface, he had a close relationship with the Osage people, but behind the scenes, he had been instructing white people to plot against them. Now, under the protection of the local police, he brazenly teamed up with his nephew Ernest to prepare to annex all the oil and wealth of the Maury family.
Now he is the only one left in the Jasmine family.
If he dies, all the oil extraction rights of the entire Jasmine family will belong to Ernest according to the headwright, and Ernest is not as honest as he appears on the surface. He participated in all of this. Before marrying Jasmine, he often went out with some fox friends to rob the rich and help the poor. And the so-called flat nights, which are themselves, can be seen from this that Ernest's desire for money, although he will always squander it in the casino afterwards, he has also strengthened his determination to marry Jasmine. Now under the operation of hire, he is about to get all the heads and property of the Jasmine family.
Because Jasmine is suffering from diabetes, Hire sent him expensive insulin.
At that time, there were no more than 5 people who could afford it in the United States. Of course, this is not a good intention. Hare hopes that Ernest can add another drug to Jasmine's insulin diet, which will slow her death. Although Jasmine had already given birth to 2 children for Ernest, under the persuasion of Hare, Ernest had to agree because he had already set foot on this pirate ship and could not escape. In order to obtain the oil wealth of the Osage, Hale soon arranged for someone to eliminate his nominally best friend Henry. It is said that he purchased death insurance for Henry in advance, and even obtained Henry's personal investment rights and property through some means.
And Jasmine, who was getting pale, realized that after her sisters died one after another, she was next.
Before his death, he decided to do something for the ascetics, so under the guise of distraction, he boarded the train to Washington alone. On the day when the Native Americans met with the president, he informed the president of the murder of the Osage people and the inaction of the local police.
However, the president did not say anything at the time.
Disappointed, Jasmine returned home, ready to welcome the arrival of death, and from beginning to end, he never doubted that the husband in front of him was one of the perpetrators of the complete destruction of his family. Just as everything seemed to settle, an agent claiming to be from Washington suddenly knocked on their door. Under Ernest's inquiry, the man stated that he belonged to the federal government and had set up an investigative agency to thoroughly investigate the death of the Osage people. This agency, later known as the FBI, Ernest temporarily sent away Tyuan due to Molly's discomfort, but the other party clearly did not give up. So that night, in a panic, he found his uncle Hale and informed him that the federal government had sent agents to thoroughly investigate the matter.
If the Bureau of Investigation found out, then everything was over for him.
Hale angrily calmed down his unruly nephew, stating that he would arrange everything in advance. In order to prevent any clues from being found by the Investigation Bureau, Hale directly planned the robbery case, but this time the target was the killer who worked hard for him. When the assassin arrived outside the door, he was greeted by bullets prepared in advance by the shop owner.
This way, Hale could clean up these informants in another way.
So while the Investigation Bureau hasn't found the money yet, damn it, catch what should be caught. However, the Investigation Bureau did not take an ordinary path at all, and they began to conduct secret investigations around other people in the town. Sure enough, an old man provided them with an important clue, which was that he had seen Ernest's cousin Brian and a man named Morrison accusing Molly's sister Anna of being named Big Mouth. Afterwards, Anna was found dead in a remote suburb, so federal agents decided to start with Anna's death. They first targeted Morrison, who was also one of Ernest's members who often robbed the rich to help the poor. Previously, he married several ascetic people as wives, but all of them eventually had accidents, so it is best for him to be the starting point for investigation. As the federal agent speculated, Morrison expressed his willingness to cooperate without saying a word after being arrested. Next, he confessed to being employed by Ernest and then teamed up with his cousin Brian to get rid of Anna. With Morrison's active cooperation, Hale found Ernest ahead of time. Obviously, Ernest would not escape in the future, so Hale advised him not to worry. With his network, he could ensure that Ernest would not be caught for too long. However, before that, in order to ensure that the head power of the Jasmine family would not be taken away by others, he hoped that Ernest could sign an agreement to transfer these assets to their family's name, to prevent unnecessary accidents and troubles in the future. Under his repeated promises, Ernest signed foolishly. Not long after, the investigators brought Ernest to the station and accused him of murdering Jasmine's sister Anna, as well as his sister Rita and Island Dan Bill. But no matter what, Ernest stubbornly refused to admit it, believing that his uncle would definitely save him out. On the other hand, without Ernest's care, Jasmine, who was on the verge of becoming terminally ill, was discovered by other Osages and taken to the hospital. With the doctor's rescue, Molly finally began to slowly recover his normal body. At this point, federal agents informed Ernest that as long as he was willing to stand up and correct his uncle Hale, the federal government would guarantee not to sue Ernest and allow him to return to his own home and reunite with his family. Ernest firmly believed that his uncle could save him, so he refused to cooperate with the Bureau of Investigation. So federal agents released the assassin they had previously arrested. The assassin informed Ernest that not long ago, his uncle Hale had someone burn a note for him. As long as he helped eliminate his nephew Ernest, Hale would find someone to rescue him. But the assassin no longer believed this cunning words. After all, the reason he was caught was because of the other party's arrangement, so he persuaded Ernest to tell the truth, otherwise he wouldn't have lived long in prison. After being informed by the assassin and promised by the Bureau of Investigation, Ernest decided to correct his uncle. On the day of the trial, a lawyer suddenly stood up and claimed to be Ernest's agent. As he could not see his client, he now requested to have a separate conversation with Ernest. Despite opposition from the prosecution lawyer, the judge still asked Ernest for his opinion, and Ernest agreed to the other party's request. This instantly caused dissatisfaction from the ascetics and the prosecution lawyer, and the entire court became chaotic. Unfortunately, the judge could only announce a new hearing the next day, which happened to give Black Second a chance. That night, the lawyer hired by Black Second warned Ernest that if he went to correct his uncle, his charges would also be established. Then, in order to make him give up correcting, lawyer Black 2 began to guide Ernest.
Government men, they beat you, and they tortured you.
Oh, no, but they did keep me up for days.
No! They beat you! They beat you!
Yes, they beat me.
Thank you!
And next, Morrison's correction confirmed Ernest's suspicion of murder. If he does not cooperate with the Bureau of Investigation to correct his uncle Hire, he will face life imprisonment. And yesterday, the lawyer's words had already made him give up working with the Bureau of Investigation. Just as he was about to take on all the blame, the federal agents suddenly brought him bad news, which was that one of Ernest's children had to go to bed due to illness. The man who learned this news instantly collapsed.
There's no easy way around it, son.
They took my baby.
The next day, accompanied by federal agents, Ernest attended the child's funeral. After the funeral, Jasmine walked up to him and touched his face before leaving without saying anything. And with the child's death, Ernest blamed everything on the sins they had committed. This time, he did not hesitate to cooperate with the Bureau of Investigation to correct his uncle. In the court, Ernest told all the truth. Molly had mixed feelings when she heard that her husband confessed to murdering her sisters. Afterwards, when the two met alone, he asked his husband if he had really revealed all the truth. Ernest said it was right. He told the truth just to protect Molly and the child, but Molly suddenly asked him what exactly he injected himself with. Upon hearing this, Ernest trembled as he answered, "Result." With Jasmine's departure, the entire story came to an end. According to the true historical truth, both Hale and Ernest were ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment. It is ironic that Hale was released early in 1947 for bribing politicians and eventually lived to the age of 87 in a nursing home before passing away. Ernest was also pardoned for his good behavior and crimes, but Molly had already divorced her. Finally, Ernest spent his later years alone in a trailer park. As for Molly, she died of diabetes in June 1937 at the age of 50, and was finally buried beside the graves of her parents and sisters. The movie Flower Moon Assassin has a total duration of 208 minutes, almost 3.5 hours. The short narration is not enough to explain the complex and contradictory relationships of the characters in the entire story. Although this is a heavy and lengthy historical story, overall it is full of reflection and implications. Putting aside the plot, the collision of Oscar-winning actors and their acting skills is brilliant and unparalleled. As always, Little Lizzie has contributed excellent acting skills, portraying a character who is not intelligent and is at the mercy of others, but also full of complex inner thoughts with great depth. Although sometimes it can be seen that the performance is too forceful, it is precisely his performance that makes the character more three-dimensional. And the one who plays the most against him is Oscar-winning actor Robert De Niro. From An Irishman to this Flower and Moon Killer, his collaboration with director Martin Scorsese was not a one-time success. Robert De Niro's acting skills were smooth and introverted, and you never imagined before that this kind old man, after tearing off his hypocritical mask, would become so cruel and ruthless. Sincerely recommend everyone to take a look at the original film. Thank you for watching. See you in the next issue.